Coming back to class, and we're talking about the ways that a missionary needs to be supported. I want to remind you that this is an open forum. You can ask questions at any time. If one of the teachers is talking about something and you have a thought, just when you find a little pause in the statement, just raise your hand and please ask questions. And also with our book that we're reading, in chapter 3 alone, we read chapters 3 and 4 this week. Chapter 3 alone was a book in itself. Do you guys feel that? That whole thing about preparing, all of the things to consider. This book that you have is a book that you're reading now for the first time, and then when you actually are moving overseas, you're going to read it again. And when you're living there, you're going to read it again. This is one of those lifelong books on missions. It's not just a one-time breeze through. Chapter 3 alone was enough for you to consider for months and to begin to apply it. So as we look at these things, Trent, we're going to turn it back to you, and we're going to look at a few things. We're going to talk about different ways that a missionary needs to be supported. A support team, a supporting church, a sending agency. One of them is going to be a theological support. How much training and teaching is the missionary going to do theologically? How much they need to have in their reservoir before they go? So there's some questions on theology. There's questions on financial support. How do we raise it? How much do we raise? When is it done? When does it need to continue? How often? A lot of issues on that. We're going to look at moral support, just encouraging the person. Everybody that goes in the mission field is a human that is open to weakness and failure. And so moral support is massive. And that's what we see often in the book of Acts and all throughout the New Testament. Logistical support, all the practical details. Newsletters and we call it the bits and pieces of it all. Prayer support. Without prayer, missionaries, they're going to make it because Jesus is never ever going to forsake them when they're on the field. But without prayer support, they're pretty much on their own in so many ways. Communication support, talking, communicating, working with donors, working with getting out to the general public what's happening. And then re-entry support. Re-entry support is what so many people aren't even considering or aren't aware of. So Trent, as we turn it back to you, we want to talk about developing a care team, and in considering some of these practical things that we've talked about, what do you feel if a missionary comes to you and says, I want to go out tomorrow? How would you start with them in the nuts and bolts of joining, let's say, your missions organization or becoming a part of your church in developing a care team? What would you have them do as soon as you hear that they have a call? How would they begin to start to develop that care team?
So, just specifically on the care team area, I think that I probably would, if they just came to me and said, I want to be a missionary, we would do a little coaching with them first. I think a newsletter would be probably one of the first things. I'd more get their name out there. This person wants to, and then I'd start working on the care team.
How many times would you meet with somebody before you give them the green light to actually send them out? Would you say that on the first meeting? All right, let's sign on the dotted line and let's go.
Depends who they are.
Okay, can you give us some scenarios, maybe some stories?
So like someone that's serving in the church with me, maybe even a pastor, Yeah, so we've already been walking through a lot of stuff. I know the guy pretty well, aware of a sense in his heart for a calling, and then we go forward from there. So it wouldn't be several meetings. There would be several steps to take, but initially, let's get this thing started. Okay, you're going. For instance, Eli, he was in your class here last year.
He's one of our graduate students, right?
Oh, he's at our church, and
he actually is attending Saving Grace now as his church. Okay,
yeah, so
he found a
comes
home with you guys, right?
Right. So, and I met him in your class and stuff.
That's right.
He's been a blessing. He's a part of our missions Bible study. We have a missions Bible study twice a month at my house on Sunday nights. Any of you guys are welcome to come on out. It's the second and fourth Sunday of the month.
And what do you do with that Bible study?
We go through Acts.
Okay.
And we talk missions. We often have missionaries there, so I won't teach Acts, because we'll have missionaries there sharing their experiences, what it's like to be a missionary. People that have gone out on short-term teams will come back from our fellowship and share a little update of what's happened, what's gone on. things like that. But typically, we're going through Acts just talking about missions. So it's for people like that want to support missions. This is a great place for care team members to go and to get an understanding of missions.
And this is like a home fellowship?
Yeah, it's just a home fellowship.
So it's in your house?
Yeah, it's at my house.
What
We eat.
time?
It's at 7 o'clock.
So it's not a formal gathering.
Not at all.
You just show up, sit
Yeah,
on the
bring an
couch,
international dish.
pray with people, and start to think about missions.
Yeah, bring something crazy, exotic. I mean, we ate balut there one night when we got back from the Philippines.
You want to explain what balut is?
Balut is a duck egg with a little baby duck, somewhat matured.
Developed. It's a fertilized duck egg with a partially matured duck fetus.
And it's like a hard-boiled egg, but it's got like the yolk and then the duck, and you pop it open and down the hatch. Hey, you got to get ready for missions.
And it's a delicacy in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And normally they bury it in the ground for a few months, and so then it matures.
Yeah. Oh,
The taste matures. It's an acquired taste, by the way.
you've never had one. You're missing out.
But there can be really good international food, and with over 100 different international people living amongst us with their restaurants. Go to one of
Hey,
those
on a
and bring
side
over good
note,
food.
if you want to get ready for missions, you need to eat exotic food here. The last thing you want to do is have to eat something crazy in front of the nationals and barf it up on their table. The gospel's done. Okay? Rather barf it up at my house. Okay, we have a lot more grace. So
For some reason, this morning I was remembering when our president, George Bush, actually vomited on the Prime Minister of Japan. Do you guys remember that? I was
No.
actually in Africa when it happened. He went there to visit, and he was eating, and he got some kind of a stomach flu, and he's talking, and it's just, all the press is there, and and he just turns over, and he literally vomits, and he vomits on the backside of the bed. So don't do that as a missionary. It's not good.
So identify what culture you're going to and start eating their food. That's just a total side note. That's
Because
got nothing to
they
do-
are here. We do have the
Oh,
restaurants.
absolutely.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Yeah, it's great. So if you do come to the Bible study, I tell people bring an international dish. No one does, but maybe you're more missional and you will.
That's right.
But if you don't have anything, you're welcome to show up. So yeah, it's from like 7 to whenever. We just go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Right.
Sunday night, it's casual. So,
So it's the second and fourth.
so let me come back to the question. You've talked about having a pastor, let's say, on staff with you that feels called to go, so you know them well. You
Right.
know their theology, you know their family, you know all of that. Let's say it's somebody that just attends the church or is starting to attend the church. Is there any way for you as a pastor and as a sender to get to know the person's devotional life? Because I know devotional life on the field is crucial, especially when you leave the church and you have no church to help you with worship and teaching and personal devotion. Is there any way to really determine somebody's devotional life and sending them out in the strength of their own
This is the
personal
importance
character?
of being involved in your local church
Okay.
and being sent from your local church. The terrible thing about parachurch organizations, even us at SGWM, who knows? Who really knows? When you serve in the church, you're getting involved, you're serving. I'm putting you under the leadership of another pastor. You're serving the junior high ministry, you're serving the children's ministry. We're rubbing shoulders. I'm telling you, come on in. Why don't you serve in the office? Why don't you help out with some missionaries? So then we're having community. And within community, those things are going to be brought up. So it's not like, let's have a meeting around our board, in our boardroom. We'll have a meeting. You'll tell us where you want to go. We'll say, okay, we'll send you, or we won't. That is what we do with our affiliate missionaries outside of our church. Inside of our church, there is the beauty of being able to disciple them, to get to know them, and therefore you're able to know them. And of course, finding out those, because if I'm going to send you as the pastor of our church, I want to know that you're ready to go. Now, depending on what you're called to, are you called to plant a church? Okay, that's another level of theology. Are you called to go work in an orphanage? Are you called to go do construction? So based on those levels are going to be the different concerns that that I might have, or the extensive meetings. Of course, if we're going to ordain a guy and send him out, we're planning a church. that's a big deal. I mean, obviously, we got to believe the guy's ready to
Right.
be ordained. He's a pastor. He's got the calling of a pastor. All those kinds of things. So,
Because you hold the accountability
Oh, for sure.
of that ordination before God, absolutely.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we're sending him. We're telling the people in our church, get behind this person. He's right on. He's out there doing some weird stuff. You know, that's going to reflect on our entire church, and of course, the gospel.
And the nationals that are receiving them.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
and the people in the church are not going to support the next guy I bring up. Because this guy just, wasn't legit. So,
Have you had any bad experiences, and this is just a kind of an open forum in that way? Any stories that you can remember where you thought somebody was going to do well and things went really bad?
I think I probably had. I mean, maybe my memory's not the greatest, but I think I could say there's people that I was a little hesitant about that I sent anyways, and they did really bad.
Right.
Yeah, and I shouldn't have sent them in the
Okay.
beginning.
Because I'm remembering just from in the beginning.
Yeah.
We made a lot of mistakes because
Sure.
we weren't.
Yeah, people
we
are
weren't aware.
passionate. I've got to go. I
Yeah.
want to go, but there's something off, and it wasn't right. Because the reality is sometimes people can want to do missions so they don't have to work a secular job in America. I mean, let's get real honest. That is one of the motivations of someone that they're failing in every place they are doing in their employment, and they're like, why don't I just go be a missionary? It just seems like it'd be so much fun, and I could just seek the Lord
And get paid for it.
And I wouldn't be put on staff at the church because they wouldn't put me on staff, but maybe they'll send me as a missionary and that kind of, that's of course they don't come and say that in an interview. Hey, I just am failing in every place. Charles Spurgeon said in lectures to my students that, I'm actually going through it right now with these guys over here in our little discipleship thing. If you, speaking about the call of a pastor, he says, if you can do anything else but the call, and I would say that at missions, if you can do anything else but do missions, do it. If you're content being a banker, if you're content working in some office somewhere, and you're fine with that, then you're not called to missions. If you can't do anything else but go be a missionary, then you're probably called to missions. I mean, it's got to be a strong call. It's not like, hey, that would be cool. There's a lot of problems with people that have this, perspective of missions. It's going to be awesome. I mean, I'm just going to go to another country. They like to travel. They like other cultures. I'm going to go to another country and I'm going to be a missionary. It's like the glory of Christianity. And as you well know, Rob, they crumble and fall real fast. And as you know, being a missionary, you go out there and it isn't what you thought it was.
Those emotions just wear off.
Oh, they're gone.
They pop. It blows up to this unrealistic thing and then poof, pops and the whole thing crumbles.
Yeah, and people lose their faith.
Sure, absolutely.
Because they're disoriented with God.
Yeah, shipwreck.
Yeah, because they
True term,
thought
yeah.
God was this certain way, and God never said He was that way. So, did you have a
I
comment?
just, from my personal experience, starting missions, within the first year, it was like the Lord taught me humility over everything. So going on the mission field, you're really pumped, you're excited, but you learn quickly that you're going to be humble. You learn quickly that the Lord is going to just refine you. And then through it all, like this, your mission is the gospel.
Right.
There's no other mission. Like, you're not going to visit people, you're not
Right.
going for a good time, and you're going to be persecuted. You're going to be, spiritual warfare is going to increase. So, once you start going, you're going to see that.
Yeah.
That paradise maybe that somebody might have in mind, or that vision of missions, God's going to show you real quick
Yep.
what it's all
Yeah, the romantic delusion quickly fades,
It will fade,
and
and then
you're
your
called to
passion-
die.
If
Is what
your
you're
passion
saying.
still
Yeah.
remains after that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, bringing up Eli said to me the other day, if I don't go, I don't know what my life will turn out to be. I
Yeah.
can't be satisfied anymore with a job that makes tons of cash and the 401k and all the security. I can't do it. I can't. I gotta go.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to hear from him.
Yeah,
Before I
that's-
sent him to you to
In
say.
my first interview
Yeah.
with him, that's what he said.
Okay.
And I recognized, okay, this guy's got a call.
Right. Now, talk to us about marriages, as you and I have experienced maybe the husband feels called, or maybe they both feel called, but the husband is not just qualified, but he's going to do it, or the wife doesn't feel the same calling, or she might feel called, but she's not qualified to do it. You follow me?
Yeah.
On that, God calls them together and doesn't call them separately.
Yes and no.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's never. This isn't like we're in a classroom, right? We're around a table. We got our computers out. We got our Bibles out. This is easy stuff right here. Sometimes we present things as if this is just works. You do this and it'll work. Do this and it'll help you. But there's a lot of stumbling and falling, and sometimes a guy's dragging his wife along, and he probably shouldn't go. You know, and this is where good missional counseling would come in. Guys that understand missions, understand what it's like to be a missionary, what the trials are going to go through, and be able to discern, like pastors, they're not ready. They can't go. Then there's a wife who's just a little scared. She's a little hesitant. And, you know, she ultimately realizes, I need to follow my husband. This is a call on his life. We've been doing this for years. It's not like just like I got this vision last week.
Right.
You know, but this is, you know, I'm going, and I want to support him, but I'm scared. And she's a little weak, to be honest. She's just, her personality is a little more recluse. She's a little weak. She's
Timid.
she's not adventurous. She's not, husband's like, let's go. And she's just like, ah. And I was meeting with a couple this week. Been missionaries for almost 2 decades. And they're home now. And I could tell right away by talking to him, the wife he kind of dragged her along on several of their missions and excursions. She was fully supportive, she was fully behind him, but she was struggling a little bit. Did God not call them? No, I couldn't say that. I mean, you know, they were very successful and things. And then there's cases that, like you're probably referring to, where the wife wasn't fit for ministry.
She disqualifies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
or the husband. And it can go both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they should not have been in ministry. Listen, if they're not qualified to be in ministry in our church, if I wouldn't put them in leadership in our church, I better not even consider sending them to the field. Your typical church today is like, these guys are kind of a problem in the church. They want to do missions. Awesome. Let's get rid of them. We send our worst. We should send our best. We don't. We send our worst. And that's kind of like just a pastor figuring out a nice way to support them, but get them out of his hair. Oh, and that's an absolute wreck for the mission field.
You and I were talking today about a missionary that I met, and he told me that his pastor actually kicked him out of the church and said, get out of here.
Yeah.
Go to Africa. You'll do better there than here.
Right.
And he was joking, but I think in the end,
He was kind of a wreck.
he
He's a psycho.
yeah. So
I mean, he's a wild-eyed psychopath.
yes,
Yeah.
that
You were
was.
telling us about that guy the other day.
Yeah, I was telling you about
He's
him. yeah.
awesome. I love the guy.
Great friend, but it was a difficult. Just a couple weeks back, I was meeting with a missions pastor that was becoming a missionary, and he went to his senior pastor and he said, I feel called to go. And his senior pastor's like, I'm upset. I'm upset that you're going to leave me.
Yeah.
I spent all this time grooming the staff and getting everybody ready, and things were going great. And now you want to leave me and go on the mission field?
Yeah.
And the missions pastor said to me privately in the office, I feel shunned, and I feel like I'm set aside. Like everybody took a staff retreat, and the senior pastor said to the missionary to be, the missions pastor, why don't you just stay home and man the phones? And the guy was hurt. He was like, I'm called to go out. And my senior pastor just literally sets me aside and says, in a sense, he became a second-class pastor.
It's very hard for a senior pastor
To lose.
to pour and to invest and to build. He's building his church. Let's just be real honest. That's what he's doing. And I do it too. And you guys would do the same thing. Whatever ministry, you're on the mission field, you're building your ministry. You got your team, it's set. And then let's say you're on the mission field, you're building the ministry, things are going good, and they go, I'm going to go do ministry with that person over there because I feel called to that people group.
Right.
You're like, that's going to be a big hole So naturally, we have that response. We have to have the vision for the gospel. Of course, that's not the right response to that guy. A pastor should support someone in their calling, and of course, that guy's discouraged. But I get it on the senior pastor side. I get that. But you're not building your kingdom. And here's one of the biggest problems. And again, I'm talking to the wrong group about this stuff because I need to be talking to a group of pastors. But the biggest problem that that I see in the ministry is that we don't have, as pastors, a vision for the mission field. Therefore, when a missionary leaves our church, see, that's the term we use.
Right.
We're really saying we sent them out, but especially their staffers. They leave our church. We see them as leaving our church. We don't see the missionary as an extension of our body to the uttermost parts of the earth, which is what we should see. It should fire us up. It's fulfilling the Great Commission. It's fulfilling what we're called. I've had to sit down with my elders and just say, we're talking about missionaries. We're talking about maybe helping out financially. They've got this situation. There was one girl, she was getting married. There was no one to help her get married, like put the wedding together. She's in India, and so I wanted to send my wife.
So she was American.
She was an American, marrying a national.
Indian, right.
The wedding was going to be in India. I wanted to send my wife to go help her. There was no one to do her hair.
Yeah, because there's nobody around. There's no family. There's nobody
They're all
around her,
Indians. Their hair,
Yeah. It's the concept of getting a bride ready.
Right.
Yeah.
How are we going to encourage our young missionary girl? No one to help plan the wedding. My wife, as you well know,
Of course, yeah. She loves that stuff.
Awesome at wedding coordinating
Yeah,
and
she loves it.
planning and events and all. I mean, just like this is just butter for her. So I told our elders, like, we should send my wife to go be with her.
Pay for it.
They said, well, aren't there, shouldn't we focus on our church, is what they told me. I said, we are. I said, that is our church. That missionary girl is part of our flock. And we need to minister to her just like we'd minister to anyone. I said, listen, if one of you guys were sick and you were in the hospital and I didn't come and visit you, wouldn't you feel like you're not shepherding me? And so what's the difference? And to that elder's credit, he's like, wow, I didn't think of it that way. And it's a change of a paradigm. But that is the paradigm of many, many churches. This is our church. In these walls, this is what we're doing. You go outside of them. I mean, I heard a very prominent Calvary pastor say, when a pastor comes to him and says, I feel like the Lord's called me to plant a church, he fires them on the spot.
Right there.
Right there, because he's no longer a shepherd to these people. He feels called somewhere else. I'm just thinking, well, now, what is that?
So he says, like, there's the door, don't let it hit you on the way out?
Basically, like,
Wow.
you've just given your 2-week notice.
Okay.
And that's great. That's what God's called you, but your heart is no longer here. How short-sighted is that? I'm talking a big Calvary.
Right.
A guy I love and love his teaching.
Right, yeah.
This is crazy thinking. It's like, no, you're an extension of our church to the world. And you're a part of our fellowship. And you're a part of our staff. And you're just extending outside of the borders of the city we're pastoring here to another city. Isn't that good news? Isn't that the goal? Isn't that great? But that's not the way most pastors think. So, we talk about the tip of the Spirit and the shaft behind it. The shaft is us, the care teams, the pastoral staff, the senders, the whole body. We're going to thrust that person out when we realize they're part of our church. Never do they stop being a part of our church because they follow the call of God in their life to reach people with the gospel. I mean, isn't that nuts?
Right.
That we think like that? They're no longer a part of the church because now they followed the call of God to preach the gospel to the ends of the earth.
Yeah,
They're helping us as a church fulfill the Great Commission.
come on.
But that's the American mindset. So that's a sad. And
Yeah.
again, like I said, this probably doesn't help you guys.
Well,
Unless you're called to be a pastor.
Yeah, one more story. I was at a missions conference, and one of our largest Calvary Chapel pastors got up and shared, and he said, if I get a newsletter from a missionary, I just throw it away. As a missionary, and this is a missions conference, and as a missionary, I was like, did he just say that? And we all kind of looked around at each other like, he just said that, right? But he's so successful in the movement, nobody wanted to say anything out loud, but I almost gasped, right? As a missions pastor, missionary, all that. And he says, here's the reason why. I went from this part of San Bernardino, wherever, Southern California, to this part of LA, and I didn't send out newsletters. I didn't do any of that stuff. I went from here to there, and God provided for me, and everything was okay. I didn't need to tell people and send out newsletters, and just walk with God. And we were like, okay. And then I had to step back and say, okay, don't be angry, don't be prideful, don't be upset. Just ask yourself, in his experience, that's all he knows. And so that's okay for him. But I had to literally, every time he speaks, this has been like 5 years, I have to forget that I ever heard him say that. Yeah. Because he's one of our largest speakers. He's at most of our conferences. And it just blew my mind. But that was his paradigm in missions. Yeah, and we're not here to bag, we're just here to say this is reality.
It is unfortunate. It is unfortunate that there's an ignorance to the gospel. I could just simply make an argument on this whole point theologically. I mean, I don't need to have never ever done missions in my life. It's not like I've got this love for travel. I hate traveling. I hate planes.
You'd rather be at home.
I hate heat and humidity. And that's everywhere I go. It takes trains, planes, crazy driving, psychopath, death-ending driving, and humidity and sweat and a lot of curry. I'd way rather be at home. But
coaching the boys in sports.
Teaching the Word of God
teaching
in a nice
but I'm just
air conditioning
your
sanctuary.
Family, your family, your church, family and church, yeah.
But God's called us to do missions, and so we have to go. But unfortunately, we just think about ourselves. It's just arrogance. I mean, it's just like foolishness, that kind of thinking.
Now, let's take this a step further. In this photo that we see about these care teams, we see one person in the middle and all of these other people around him saying, we're going to pray for you and love you. When we think about the people that God sends out, does he send out people with awkward, sometimes hard to deal with personalities? Sometimes we use the term in missions, unique people. And how do we, as unique people being sent out or sending out unique people, how do we work together? Because we know that Jesus says in John 13, 34 and 35, that they'll know you're Christians by your love for one another, right? As I have loved you, Jesus says, you love one another, and the whole world will know that you're my disciples by your love for one another. Yeah. How do we interact with this unique, passionate, zealous individual that God's sending out when sometimes our personalities just don't mesh?
Yeah. Many missionaries are different. They're just personality-wise, they're just different. And that difference in America really shines in a bad way. In another culture, it's usually really good. We've got to recognize that. God's built them in a certain way that they're going to be able to handle this crazy thing called missions and go to another culture and be happy. And oftentimes we shun them. And we look at them as they're not fit. And we need to embrace them. We just need to know that God chooses the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And he is ready to confound even you as he uses this person. And so as a pastor, you know, I often see that. And I've learned to appreciate it. I've learned to go, this guy doesn't fit in America because God hasn't made him for America.
But he's not disqualified.
Right, not at all.
This isn't his best fit.
Right, this isn't his best fit. And, you know, I said we send out our best. And sometimes I do send out guys that are like, yeah, I probably wouldn't have him be a pastor here. Not because it's a bad thing, but he just doesn't fit. People wouldn't follow him. People wouldn't be ministered to by him because he's just a little awkward.
Personality is what we're talking about.
Yeah,
mostly
we're not
personality.
talking about character or anything.
Or
We're just talking about
theology or anything like
he's
that.
just quirky. He's a little recluse maybe. He's a little, you know. Sometimes they're just like, the best word I could use is awkward. They don't just flow in society, in church life well. They're warm. They're, embracing. They're just kind of like, they look like they're out of, that guy's out of place. And he is. Because God has done something in their heart, ripping out this culture. He's preparing them. They don't even know what's happening. God is just preparing. Now, that's not every missionary, of course. And so you've got to be able to discern that and, recognize, but that takes experience. That takes seeing this happen, seeing how God uses them. And then you're out on the mission field with them thinking, okay, we'll see how they do. And I'm out of the mission field. I've got a missionary right now I can think of that has been serving for years on the mission field that doesn't really fit in America. Actually drives me nuts when they're at the church and when they were at the church. Not in a bad way, not in a crazy way. I love them and minister to them and give them a place in the church, and people loved them in the church. But
there's an irritation.
Yeah, they're totally. It's like sandpaper. And like in where they're working in Asia, they fit in perfect. In fact, they're unique and weird things that I think are weird are actually blessings. And watching them on the field in that element, I'm like, wow, they were made for this, and they do it way better than I would. And I would have prejudged them as unfit in my ignorance. So you got to learn to recognize calling and gifting and uniqueness as something given by God. Because God's created our personalities, and He's allowed certain circumstances in our life to develop those, and He's going to use them. So.
Right. We often joke, and this is an inside joke, Trent and I were born only a year and a half apart, same upbringing, same DNA. We shared a room until we were like 18 or whatever. Totally opposite, 100%. And this is the way the Lord has done it. Yeah. And He's called you to stay in sin, and He's called me to go.
Yeah.
And we felt called, I think, even in our first trip, that whole trip to India.
Yeah, we fought like the whole time. You're mad at me.
So you remember that? Okay, one time, let me get best story. This is now 5 years after our first missionary trip.
Sandpaper. I'm like,
we're actually living in Uganda. Trent comes out with a group from the church, and we had been there for 9 months. We were given approval to build a building for the first time and have our own home. And so Trent came out with a team. It was actually some family members, people from the church, and we're going to have this short-term team. And it was really exciting. Well, he brought out a taser, right? Or somebody did. And we were told in those days, if you get bit by a snake, you can tase it and it neutralizes the poison. That never worked. But long story short, I got this taser in my hand, and I'm goofing off with it because I love electricity. And Trent goes, "Don't you dare tase me. I'll never do it."
He's got problems with electricity.
I love it. When we were kids,
he would shock himself personally.
When we were kids, the only way I could get him to leave me alone was to shock him, because then I was an electrician and I would do all this stuff. So a lot of history behind this. We're talking about totally unsaved, kids fighting constantly, and mom's like, "I'm gonna kill myself." My boys are trying to kill themselves. So now we're both born again. We're sanctified, senior pastor, senior missionary on the mission field. He's getting into the van. I've got this taser in my hand. I'm getting in after him. Somehow I slipped and I tased him right in the middle of his back, and he went and hit his head, and he came out like, "I'm gonna kill you."
Gonna beat him.
I'm all.
It's gonna be blood.
I didn't do it on purpose. I promise. This wasn't. I didn't mean to do it. He's looking at me like, "Right now, dude, it's over. It's over."
I'm like this.
And I'm like, the people that are watching, we're supposed to love one another. So who intervenes? My wife. Right? Gentle, calm wife. She intervenes. "Trent, now Rob wouldn't do that on purpose." And
right.
Rob,
you don't know
really
him.
Need to.
Yeah.
So in our book, when we were reading this week in chapter 3, he talked about, this is the missionary that was writing the book, he talked about his boys got that little device where they would put rocks into a little barrel, and the barrel would turn the rocks all week long, and the rocks were supposed to come out all polished and looking nice. And he forgot by the end of the week when they took the rocks out and they were still really square and they weren't polished. He said, "We forgot the sand." And he said that's what God does. God puts these unique people in the mission field, and then He adds culture and all this other stuff, which is the sand, and He lets them just churn and churn and churn. And what's He doing? He's shaving off rough edges. And so, yes, everybody's going to be unique. We're all going to be sandpaper on each other in these times. And so as we're thinking about going out and being sent out, we need to be so humble and we need to love, and we need to be ready to do whatever it takes to be a part of it. So Trent, just another question about a care team and putting together the team before we talk about the individual ways that a care team helps people. Let's say somebody comes to you and they say, I feel called to a certain people group, or I feel called to a certain country. Have you had reservations as you've grown as a mission sender and sending people to one place or another? Or have you come to the point where you say, I can help you do whatever God's called you to do, or we as an organization, we only do these certain things because it's hard to do everything well. Sometimes we narrow it down. So like somebody might say, I want to join Saving Grace World Missions, or I might want to go with Wycliffe or another really large mission sending agency. How do we determine who sends, who goes, and who connects with each other?
Yeah, first of all, I would always tell a missionary, you're not called to a place.
Okay.
You're called by God to preach the gospel to the world. So don't get hung up, because my experience tells me that someone says I'm called to this certain people group, and they don't eventually end up at that people group. It's like the Macedonian call that Paul had. There was a man from Macedonia saying, "Come over and help us." He goes to Macedonia. He ends up in Philippi. He meets women. There's no man. Where's the man from Macedonia? He has a vision. You would think he'd show up and there's the dude. I saw him in my vision. There he is right there. It's women. It's Lydia. It's women at the riverside. Paul continues with that ministry. The only man he ever meets there is the jailer.
The Philippian jailer, right?
Was he the guy? I don't know. It didn't seem like it. It didn't say like we saw the man. So God, and you know this in your experience, when God called you and spoke, and there was even like some prophecies and visions. Generally, they were true, but specifically, you were going to go start an orphanage. That never was what God had for you. You were going to take orphans in. God showed you that didn't work. So, but God used it to get you there.
Right. And now hundreds and thousands almost are orphans are being taken care of.
So God had a plan, but not the way A lot of times we add to that. We go, okay, that means this, this, and this. God's called me to this. So I would just warn someone to be careful. I'm not suggesting that where you want to go is wrong. I'm not suggesting the place you want to go. For me, I want people to be led by the Spirit. I don't want to put them in a box. So I've got a vision. Right now, we're building a full-fledged Bible college in India, a Calvary Chapel Bible College. We have 5 acres. We're building that. That's in the southern part of India. We have in the central part of India a pastor school. And then in northern part, in the foothills of the Himalayas amongst the unreached, we have a pastor school. So that's where my heart is. So that's where I want people to go. We need help.
Right.
So I get someone coming to me, and selfishly, I want to say to them, God's called you to India. I've got a perfect place for you. I've already got your bed. It's ready. It's ready for you. I need you. Go. I have to be very careful with that, because they don't have a heart for India. They have a heart for something else. And so I will discern. I've done this long enough to be able to, I think, do this decently. I listen. I listen to them talk, share what God's spoken, and I'm able to discern this person is not going to do good where they think they want to go. Why? Because they're all alone. It's not going to work. They need a team. Well, this is where we have some bases. So here's your options. You can go to this base or this base and serve there for the next 6 months, and we'll get you missionary training on the mission field. It's not necessarily where you want to go, but it's a step in that direction. We're not saying we won't send you there, but let's try this first. So test the waters before I just throw them to the sharks, basically. A lot of times we get single girls, and it's a shame.
How many percentage-wise are single young ladies?
We get 2 kinds of missionaries coming through. We get those that are already established and on the field that call us and need help because they didn't go out right.
Right.
It's a total tragedy. Those are usually married couples.
Right.
People fresh, ready to go out. We have 2 single girls we've interviewed in the last month. No single guys. No.
I'd say it's at least 80% Single ladies.
Yeah, I mean, I
That's
see the
AFL
pictures
club.
of you in Africa. It's Rob and his girls. There's all these single girls out there. It's like, this is like
normal,
crazy
yeah.
psycho
Yeah, they're the only ones that
missions. Like,
risk
we're
their
going to
lives.
die driving down this road.
And
we're
they
the
actually
great,
get their
mighty
guitars
men
out.
of God.
They get their guitars out and they worship all the way
Yeah.
through.
So, yeah, and they're probably better for you than the guys, because the guys just think they're going to fight and the girls are going to do some spiritual warfare. So there's a plague within the American church that guys are wimps
Okay.
when it comes to missions. I just, you know,
It's the best way to say it.
oh yeah, I love saying that. I mean, just generally, that's what we find. Girls are way more brave, way more willing to take steps of faith, to risk their lives. I mean, these girls are way more vulnerable. They can get raped. They have things that they have to worry about. Guys don't have to worry about, but they still go. You know, they're weaker, they're physically and all those things, and they go. So, you know, we just got to give it up for the ladies right now. But you know, it's important for someone to discern kind of, and this is where you need leadership. So you come, you say, I'm called to missions, I want to do this. Well, I'm not, you know, and I've had like, there's a missionary gal we have in India. She's passionate. She's like your Katie Polliner. You know, I'm going to take beans and rice to the mob of kids out there,
Right.
and just get killed. She wanted to move into the village in the foothills of the Himalayas. Total, absolute Hindu village, way up in the foothills, no security, nothing. I'm just going to move in there. I'm going to learn the language. I'm going to live in the dirt, and I'm going to reach them. No, you're not. No, you're not. You are not. And all the nationals like, she can't do that. That won't work. That won't do anything. Like, they won't accept her. She's not one of them. These are village people. You know, all the nationals are saying you can't. I have to. That's what God's called me to. There's times you got to put your foot down and say, no, you're not. We're not sending you. You know. So she married a national. Now she can do that. So she solved her problem. But you know, sometimes there's passion overriding. A passion to do something overrides. I must go. I have to go. If I don't go, I'm in sin. Slow down. Let's take a deep breath and let's walk through this. The best counsel I could give to anyone that's passionate about missions is slow down. Just like, you know, a young couple that are ready to get married. Slow down. It's okay. You don't have to get married tomorrow. It's all good. We're not doubting your calling. We're not doubting that God's put you together. But, you know, so I don't know if that answers the question.
And I think just to summarize, trusting the national's opinion, where
Big
you and
time.
I would say, man, that'd be a great step of faith, and maybe
Yeah.
at work, if the nationals say no, and we feel no, that's when we
Yeah,
would say
and-
it's not the right thing to
And
do.
the only thing in the back of my mind, my conscience says, you know, but what about Hudson Taylor?
Amy
What-
Carmichael,
Yeah,
whoever,
everyone said no.
Bruchko. Yeah.
You know, Hudson Taylor, you cannot dress like a Chinese guy. Every single missionary around there,
Everybody.
you know.
They actually kicked him out of the missions
Oh, for sure.
organizations
No, he was
because
totally
he
shunned.
was simply going to dress like a common Indian. They
Oh.
said, if you're not British, you're not Christian.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you're a despised to the British,
Right.
you know, crown. They told him. I mean, you are shaming the name of Christ.
Right.
So we want to remain open to the Holy Spirit speaking. So I'm always like, I don't think that's wise, but you know, we'll pray, and we'll seek God, and if God speaks to all of us clearly, we'll go for it. And our hearts are whatever God wants.
Right.
So it's important not to get rigid, and that's the problem with missions organizations. They get rigid because they're not a church. You know, we're a missions organization, but we're a church, and there's a blessing there. We have a full functioning body behind these people that are going. And it's not just stale office business, boom, this is our policies and procedures, read the manual, sign your name in blood, this is what we do. If you don't follow and jump through these hoops, we're not doing it. So you want to remain open to the Holy Spirit and seeking the Lord. You know, but unless God radically spoke, we're not going to do it. So,
And just a final question before we take a break. If somebody feels called to do Bible translation, could you send them out to do that, or would they need to go with Wycliffe or somebody else that focuses 100% with all that training and all of those details?
yeah, and it depends on where it is, what it is, and what their skill set is. I mean, if I've got a guy that is trained in Bible translation, is fluent in Greek, has a vision, has an understanding of how he's going to get into that culture, learn that language, all that stuff, then let's do it. I'm all about pioneering. Sometimes you get in the big organizations and you get bogged down.
Politics.
And what they do is they move their guys
Procedures.
around.
Yeah.
And what happens is, this is what happens in parachurches. This is what we tend not to are committed not to do as a sending agency, is to steal that missionary from their pastor and his leadership over their life, that church's leadership over that missionary, where we're saying, hey, we know that you're here in Mexico, but we really need you in India. So we're going to put you in India. We need you there. I need you to teach in India. The pastor of the sending church has no say. But they don't have a heart for India. Like, that's not fair. So that's my hesitation of working with a parachurch. At the same time, if it's something that's over our head, clearly these guys have the training, they're awesome, it fits this guy's calling, then of course we would encourage them.
Bless them in that.
Yeah, because we're not going to reinvent the wheel. But one of my sticking points is we are at Calvary Chapel, and we are planting Calvary Chapels. I mean, our main tip of our spear as a church is church planting, to raise up nationals, starting Bible schools to disciple the nationals to reach their own people, period. And the tip of it is the unreached. So that's what we're about.
And the model would be teach the word, in the sense that when you use the word Calvary Chapel, you mean teach the word.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't have the name, it's still the same philosophy.
We tend to keep the name.
Right.
Because we want people to understand what Calvary Chapel is.
Okay.
So it's teach the word, it's be open to the Spirit, it's not to be crazy charismatic.
Sure, of course.
Most of the mission world.
Yeah, it's either one or
world
the
is.
other, dead or
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
So we tend to teach the distinctives and those things. So that's what we're doing. That's what I'm going to invest my time into. That's what we're doing. We're planting churches that are reproducing themselves, that are going to make disciples, that are going to plant other churches. So that's what we're focused on. That isn't to say someone says, I want to go serve in this orphanage in Mexico with the Baptists, that I wouldn't send them. But that's not going to be a focal point of our resource, like our bases that we're building and stuff. So we work with both, but that's where I'm going to try to put people, because I also want people to be in a team. I think if you can send people from the same church, same philosophy, with a team, they're going to succeed way more. If you send them with some other team, they join another team, it's a different church, different philosophy. Some work because they're similar. Others are an absolute disaster, because that person's just going to be caught up, and now all of a sudden he realizes these guys are like Anglicans, and they're going to start wearing robes and baptizing babies, and you didn't know that going into it. And this guy's like, what am I doing here? I'm just spinning my wheels. I don't believe in any of this stuff. So doing our due diligence and research. I mean, right now, we're looking to plant a work in Jordan. So I had a meeting last week. That's our next step. And God spoke to me and said, I want you to start a school ministry in Jordan. And I told God, no. I'm building a Bible school in India. We can't do all of this. And so God just said, I want you to start a school in Jordan. No. And so I've been fighting God for a year, and I surrendered. I just said, okay. I don't know where we're going to get the money to do all this, but okay. So we're partnering with a Baptist pastor in Jordan. No, we're taking it slow. We're doing a vision tour. We've got a house already. God's already provided a house, a place to, do this. There's a Christian city in Jordan. A guy at our church is from that city. It's his house. He knows the pastor. I've been to Jordan. I've met the pastor. He's spoken to our church. So God's connecting, and we're talking about starting a Calvary Chapel Bible school in a Baptist church. So sometimes you got to think outside of the box. Now, the Baptists over there are different than the Baptists here. They believe in the baptism of the Holy Spirit.
Because they're on
gifts
the
of
field.
Spirit.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I've experienced that in every country.
They're dealing with Muslims. That's what they're dealing with. Muslim refugees are flooding the Jordan. And these guys are very similar to our heart, where they're ministering to people, they're reaching out, they're a small church that is doing huge ministry. And they're facilitating and processing thousands of Muslim refugees every month. Their church is like 100 people. I don't even know how they do it. But the pastor's just got faith, and he just steps out and stuff. What will happen, how that will work, I don't know. But we're walking into it slowly. We're praying. We're going to do a vision tour. I've got a few guys that are ready to move to Jordan. I got some other missionaries of ours that are already on the field in the Muslim world, that are learning Arabic, that are experienced with Islam, that I have praying about in a year or two moving to Jordan, running the Bible school.
Okay.
You know, so and I'm just throwing that out now.
Sure.
You seek the Lord if that's not your heart, you know,
To these other
to the
missionaries,
other
yeah.
missionary.
Because they'd have to relocate countries.
Right. I mean, it's like, did you change my call?
And you're not going
I'm
to
not telling
you're
them
not
you
going to
have
pick
to do
them
that.
up and replant
No,
them.
but pray about
Okay.
it. It's an open door. Just they seek the Lord, see what God
Right.
has. And you know, then I've got a guy in our church that's never done international Muslim ministry, single guy, that's ready to move. He's ready to go get his head cut off in, you know, Saudi Arabia. He's just one of those kind
Things
of
like
guys.
that, yeah.
You know, yeah, he's going to have a lot to learn.
Sure.
You know, but I'd like to send a team. I'd like to build a team. So that's what we're doing presently.
Right.
Is we're going to build a team. Because when you're on the mission field by yourself, that's just insanity. It's like suicide. And you go with another missions organization and you're over there with, like, you know, that's kind of like what Eli it wants to do, is go and work with the Bible school. There's a lot of danger there. I mean, it can happen. We'll send him if that's what he feels God's called him to, but you know, it's just a different whole sphere of, and you just
Sure.
kind of, you're at the mercy of them. You have no direction, vision.
Right.
And there's a sweetness in Calvary and the freedom to be led by the Spirit, to seek the Lord, to have a prayer meeting, to let God speak. We're going to go teach the Word of God. We're going to go, and God's going to do these things. There's just a freedom when you're all on the same page.
Right.
So that's kind of, you know, the different things.
Right.
And stuff, and you got to hear the Lord, and you got to be led by the Spirit. And so I wouldn't box anyone in. I wouldn't say, no, I wouldn't send this person. I'd pray about it. I'd talk to them. I'd work with them. I'd get them praying about it. Yeah, and you got to have some time. You got to let people work through it. When someone feels called to go, and they come to you and say, "I'm going to go, and this is the place I want to go," and they're just dead set on it, it's really hard to change their mind. And so what I do with them is I'm just saying, okay, we're going to just have several conversations, and I'm breaking them down. I'm breaking them down to get them to see reality, because they're not seeing reality. At the end of that, if they still feel called to go to that missions front, great, we'll send them. But if through that breaking down they start seeing the wisdom of it, it's going to be really helpful.
So the thing that we're seeing in this conversation is the bigger the organization, the more policies, and the more rigid they're going to be. So you got to choose. A lot of times the big organizations have more experience, so you have a lot larger of a wealth of people to draw from, but there's so many policies and procedures, you feel like you're in the military, and they're just putting you from one place to another. So they might have all of the facilities and all of the training, but you're not able to do what God's called you to do. And so there's a real balance in that. All right, let's take a 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we're just going to click along through a few of the things that a mission-sending church or sending agency needs to do for the missionary, and the reasons why we would join a sending agency and a sending church.